It started on a dead world, far from any sun, where the ground was black and cold like burned metal. The human soldier, Lieutenant Eric Vance, was sent there with one goal: secure the crashed Zarian beacon before the enemy reached it. He wasn't alone on the mission. His partner was Zura, a tall alien female from the race called the Rayari, with silver skin, glowing eyes, and movements like a hunter cat. They were not friends. They were assigned together during the last war as part of the Human Rayari Peace Alliance. She didn't talk much, and when she did, it was with sharp words and colder eyes. Still, she had saved his life 3 times already, and he had returned the favor without thinking. The sky above the dark planet was filled with dust storms, hiding everything from scanners. Their dropship had landed far from the beacon signal, and now they moved on foot through the ruins of a long-dead alien city. The walls around them were broken, full of strange symbols, and filled with silence like a graveyard. Every step they took echoed in the wind, and both carried weapons ready to fire at anything that moved. Zura paused near a crumbled tower, her hand raised. Eric froze, trusting. Her instincts, Rayari had stronger senses than humans, and when she went still, it usually meant trouble. She turned her head slowly, sniffing the air like an animal sensing blood. Something was out there with them, but it wasn't showing itself yet. Suddenly, the wind screamed and something heavy hit the ground behind them. A 6-legged beast, part machine, part alien, charged from the shadows, its red eyes glowing with hate. Eric fired first, his bullets cutting into the creature's metal parts, but it kept coming like pain didn't matter. Zura jumped over rubble like a ghost and landed on the creature's back, stabbing her blade deep into its neck. The battle ended in seconds, fast and brutal, and Eric's chest heaved as he looked at the creature's body. Zura was covered in black blood, her eyes glowing with a strange light, her breathing heavier than usual. She looked back at Eric, holding her stare longer than normal, then turned without a word and kept moving. He followed, but something had changed between them since the fight, something he couldn't yet explain. As they moved deeper into the ruins, the silence grew heavier, like the city itself was watching them. Zura kept sniffing the air, and her movements became sharper, faster, as if she was chasing a scent. Eric noticed her skin shimmered more than usual, and she kept glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. It wasn't fear in her eyes, it was something else, something wild, and it made his chest tighten. When they reached the center of the ruins, they found the beacon. It was still intact, but half buried in alien bones, glowing with a soft green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Zura stepped closer, touching it, and her body shivered like she had touched fire. She backed away quickly, breathing hard, and her gaze locked onto Eric again, this time not with suspicion, but with something primal. Before he could ask what was wrong, an explosion lit up the night sky behind them. Enemy drones were dropping Incarnac mercenaries, half reptile, half machine, known for their cruelty. Eric pulled Zura behind a broken wall and returned fire, but her hands trembled, and she wasn't aiming. Something deep inside her had awakened, and it wasn't fear or pain. It was something older, stronger, and dangerous. The two of them fought side by side, but Zura was no longer calm and quiet like before. She moved like a beast unleashed, with speed and violence that shocked even Eric. When the last drone fell, Zura stood over its body, breathing heavily. Her glowing eyes locked on Eric again, unblinking. He asked if she was okay, but she didn't answer. She stepped closer instead, her voice deep and strange, whispering that something had begun. Eric lowered his weapon slowly, but his eyes stayed locked on Zura. Her pupils had narrowed into slits, and her breathing came in sharp, deep pulls like something inside her was burning. The way she looked at him wasn't normal. It wasn't the cold, focused stare of a soldier. It was more like hunger, mixed with something he couldn't understand but felt in his gut. He stepped back cautiously and asked her again if she was hurt. She didn't reply. but instead tilted her head, sniffing the air near him like an animal testing a scent. Eric felt a cold chill run down his spine. This wasn't battle shock, and it wasn't fear either. Zura was changing right in front of him, and whatever it was, it had already begun. Zura suddenly turned away and began walking fast through the ruins. Her steps unsteady but quick. Eric followed her, staying alert. Unsure if the danger now was behind them or beside him, she didn't speak. But he noticed her hands trembled and her armor felt too tight on her body. Her movements had become sharper, almost aggressive, and every few steps she glanced back at him with glowing eyes. They took shelter in a large broken chamber, once a temple maybe, now just dust and fallen stone. Eric sealed the doors using a portable shield and set up a low fire in the center for warmth and light. Zura sat across from him, her back against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees like she was holding herself together. He watched her in silence, wondering what she was feeling, and if she even knew herself. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "My body, it's responding to the beacon. The old pulse. It triggered something I can't control." Eric leaned forward, trying to understand, but her words were slow and filled with pain. Rayari mating instincts are locked until a certain signal. The beacon had that frequency. Ancient, forbidden. Maybe meant for war bonding. He stared at her in disbelief, unsure if she was joking or delirious. Zura looked up at him, her eyes soft for the first time since they met, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want this. But my body is not listening anymore. And the scent, it's drawn to you." Eric felt heat rise in his chest, not from desire, but from fear of what this meant for both of them. The Rayari were a powerful species, evolved to survive brutal wars and harsh environments. Eric had read once that their mating phase was sacred, rare, and dangerous if uncontrolled. Zura wasn't just fighting the enemy anymore, she was fighting her own biology. And he was caught in the middle. She suddenly stood and backed into the shadows of the chamber, breathing faster, as if afraid of what she might do. Eric didn't move, he kept his hands visible, his voice calm, speaking like he would to a friend. "On the edge. You're strong, Zura. You've fought worse than this. Whatever's happening, we'll figure it out together." She looked at him with wide, desperate eyes, her jaw clenched, her hands shaking as she whispered, "You don't understand. If I bond, there's no undoing it." Eric took a slow step closer and said, "Then we wait it out. We survive first, then we figure out the rest." Outside, the ground trembled again. Karnak reinforcements were searching the ruins. Eric grabbed his rifle and motioned toward a hidden tunnel leading out from the temple. Zura followed, but her steps were unstable, and he had to support her as they moved through the tight corridors. The pulse from the beacon was still faint in the air, like a song only she could hear, pulling at her instincts with each step. They reached a dark cave system below the city, a place forgotten by time and untouched by scanners. Inside, Zura collapsed, her body twitching like it was overheating from the inside. Eric tore open a med pack, trying everything he could: cooling gel, nerve stabilizers, but nothing worked. Zura's eyes locked onto his, glowing with deep golden light, and she whispered something that made his heart stop. "My body. It's marking you, claiming. Even if my mind resists, it's already started." Eric froze, his heart racing as the cave air grew warmer, and her body gave off strange heat waves. He had come here to fight a war, not to become the center of an ancient alien ritual. But now, with enemies above and Zura's instincts pulling her deeper into something wild, he realized this mission had become something else entirely. Eric sat beside her in the cave, his eyes fixed on her face, unsure if he was more worried about the enemy above or the strange heat growing between them. Zura's body glowed softly in the dark, her skin no longer silver but flushed with warm light that pulsed like a second heartbeat. She wasn't just sick, she was transforming. And whatever this was, it was tied directly to him. Eric tried to stay calm, but every time she looked at him, he felt a pressure in his chest like gravity pulling him forward. He placed a hand on her shoulder, careful and slow, but her reaction was immediate. She gasped sharply. Her eyes fluttered, and she leaned into his touch like it fed something deep. Inside her, Eric pulled his hand back quickly, but the damage was done. Her body trembled, and her breath became heavier again. She looked at him with desperation, not anger, and said, "The bond is growing stronger. Your presence is like fire in my veins." Eric didn't know what to say. He was a soldier, trained for war, not for this. But something inside him refused to leave her alone, even when logic screamed that it was too dangerous. He knew the Karnak were still searching above, and staying in the cave too long meant death. But he also knew if he forced Zura to move now, her condition could spiral out of control. He opened his comlink, hoping for any signal from command, but the deep cave blocked everything. Trapped. No reinforcements, no air support. Only him and an alien partner losing control to instincts older than history. Zura curled up against the stone wall, her body shaking like she was freezing, even though heat rolled off her like waves. Eric laid down his rifle, knelt beside her, and spoke gently. "You trusted me in battle, now trust me here. We'll survive this too." She blinked slowly, her pupils wide, and whispered something he barely understood. "Rayari don't choose their bond. The pulse chooses for us. And it chose you." Eric didn't respond right away, because deep inside, something had already started changing in him too. Every second he spent near her, the air felt heavier, his thoughts slower, his instincts sharper, like something primitive was waking up. Zura reached out and touched his chest lightly, her fingers tracing the outline of his heartbeat. Her skin was hot, but the touch was soft, almost afraid. "You should run. Before I lose what little control I have left," she said with trembling lips. Eric held her hand in place and replied, "I don't leave my partner behind, no matter what she becomes." A loud crash from above echoed through the cave. Someone or something had entered the ruins. Zura's eyes narrowed, and a low growl escaped her throat. Nothing like her usual calm voice. Eric grabbed his rifle and helped her stand, feeling her lean on him like her body was drained, but her mind still ready to fight. They moved deeper into the cave, toward an old Rayari structure buried beneath the stone, a place she seemed to know by instinct. It was a circular chamber, filled with symbols carved into the walls, glowing dimly in reaction to Zura's presence. She touched the center stone and suddenly gasped, as if lightning had passed through her spine. Eric caught her before she collapsed and held her tight, her body jerking slightly as the ancient pulse flowed into her veins again. "It's a nesting chamber," she said weakly, "meant for bonding, meant for warriors who survived war together." Eric's breath caught in his throat. The place wasn't just reacting to her. It was reacting to both of them. The walls pulsed with a gentle light now, and the air felt thicker, filled with an energy he couldn't explain. Zura looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "I can fight. If for a little longer, but not forever." Eric nodded slowly, unsure of what lay ahead, but certain of one thing: he couldn't walk away now. Not when she needed him most. Far above them, the Karnak mercenaries picked up traces of heat signatures and started descending into the tunnels. Time was running out, and the cave offered no exit, only a bond neither of them asked for, but one they could no longer escape. Eric looked at Zura, her glowing eyes now filled with fear and something else: trust. They were no longer just partners. They were something more now, something that could either destroy them or save them. The chamber walls began to hum softly, as if sensing what was about to happen. Zura stood still, her eyes locked on the symbols glowing around her, and her body trembling under the weight of the instinct she fought. Eric could see her struggle, the way she clenched her fists, the way her breathing came in shallow bursts, the way her voice shook when she finally spoke. "The longer we stay here, the more it pulls at me. This place was made to complete the bond between Rayari warriors. And now it thinks we are one. He took a step closer and placed his hand on her arm, trying to keep her anchored to reality. She didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against his shoulder. The connection between them wasn't just emotional anymore. It was physical, biological, and ancient. Eric had never believed in fate or destiny, but right now something bigger than war or logic had taken hold of them both. Zura's voice was faint as she whispered, "When the bond finishes, it's permanent. You will carry my mark, and I yours. Our minds, our instincts, they will link." Eric felt his throat tighten, not out of fear, but from the weight of the decision pressing on him. He hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted anything beyond finishing the mission and making it home alive. But now, with danger above and this strange force between them, he couldn't deny what had already begun. Suddenly, the chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling as footsteps echoed through the tunnels above. The Karnak had found the cave entrance, and they were coming fast, searching with heat scanners and weapons drawn. Eric raised his rifle, checking his last clip, then turned to Zura. "Can you fight?" he asked, already knowing the answer, but hoping she'd say yes. She nodded slowly, her eyes glowing fiercely, but her body still trembled from the pull of the bond. "I can hold them off, but not for long. The instincts are rising again. It's harder to think clearly when you're near me." Eric's chest ached hearing that, but he stayed close, because no matter what happened, they were in this together. He handed her a small energy blade, the last backup weapon he had, and she gripped it with shaking hands. The two of them moved toward the entrance of the chamber, waiting behind stone pillars for the enemy to appear. Eric whispered, "We'll hit them hard, fast, and retreat deeper. There might be another tunnel on the other side of the temple wall." Zura didn't reply with words, she simply nodded, her posture straightening as the warrior in her pushed forward once again. But her eyes, even now, kept flicking toward Eric with a heat that wasn't just from battle rage. The first Karnak burst into the chamber, hissing and scanning, then its eyes widened when it saw them. Eric fired without hesitation, dropping the creature in one shot, then turned as more spilled in behind it. Zura screamed not in fear, but in something primal, and leaped into the air, her blade cutting through armor and bone like light through fog. She moved with terrifying speed, but every move she made drew her closer to Eric, her body staying near his like magnet to metal. Together, they fought like one unit, their attacks sinking, their senses sharpened by something invisible but strong. Zura's glow intensified with each kill, her body now blazing with light as her instincts pulled harder, faster. The enemies fell, one by one, but Eric could feel her strength fading. She wasn't built to resist this level of bonding for long. He grabbed her arm after the last enemy, dropped and pulled her back toward the rear wall of the chamber. Zura was breathing hard now, her hands gripping his vest, her body pressed close, trembling not from battle but from something deeper. "I can't hold it back anymore," she whispered. Her voice cracked, her eyes wide and glassy. "Either I finish the bond, or I lose myself." Eric looked at her, and for a moment, the world outside the chamber vanished. All he saw was her, not the alien warrior, not the Rayari fighter, but Zura, the one who had saved him, fought beside him, and now stood on the edge of something unstoppable. The chamber pulsed again, louder this time, and the ground cracked beneath their feet. A soft light spread from the center of the room, wrapping around them like a living current. Zura collapsed to her knees, shaking, her voice pleading, "Choose, let it happen, or leave now before I lose everything that makes me me." Eric didn't move, not because he didn't know what to do, but because his own instincts had started answering hers. Eric stared down at her, his heart racing as fast as hers, though for a different reason. Zura was kneeling, eyes glowing with light that shimmered like fire trapped behind glass. Her hands clenched into fists to stop them from reaching out to him. She was fighting her own biology with everything she had, but her strength was fading fast. Eric knew that if he hesitated a moment longer, she'd lose the part of herself that made her her. He knelt in front of her slowly, not as a soldier, not as a leader, but as a partner. "I'm here," he said softly, his hand reaching out, hovering just above hers. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Zura's lips parted slightly, her breath catching, as her hand lifted to meet his touch. The second their fingers connected, the chamber exploded in golden light, warm and heavy like the inside of a star. Eric gasped. The heat wasn't physical, but something deeper, like every part of his mind was being touched at once. His vision blurred, but not from pain. Instead, images poured into his thoughts. He saw flashes of her past, her training, her battles, her fears, and something else. Something hidden even from her. He was seeing her soul, raw and unguarded, and in return, he felt something inside himself being offered without words. Zura cried out, falling forward, but he caught her gently. Her body was still glowing, but now it pulsed in sync with his own heartbeat, as if they had become part of one rhythm. She looked up at him, and the panic in her eyes was gone, replaced by confusion, wonder, and a strange calm. The bond. It's stabilizing. You accepted it without resistance. It's merging us. Slowly. Safely. Eric didn't fully understand what that meant, but he felt it. Her thoughts whispered softly in the back of his mind, not as words but as feelings, fear, gratitude, trust, and something far more powerful. He helped her stand, and she no longer trembled. Instead, her steps were steady, her voice firm. "I'm in control again. Because of you." But something else is happening. The bond is awakening Rayari instincts that haven't surfaced in generations. Before he could ask what she meant, the chamber wall behind them cracked wide open, not from battle but from the ancient system recognizing a completed bond within. Its heart, a hidden path lit up beneath their feet, revealing a long tunnel glowing with soft green light. Zura turned toward it and whispered, "This place is more than a nesting chamber. It's a vault. A Rayari war relic buried and forgotten." They stepped inside together, the bond between them now pulsing gently like a shared heartbeat. The corridor led to a large underground dome, filled with sleeping machines, tall armored constructs, dormant but humming with energy. Zura approached them slowly, her eyes wide in disbelief. These are bond-forged battle mechs, designed to be powered by two warriors who are linked. One Rayari, one chosen. Eric suddenly understood. The beacon wasn't just sending signals to awaken instincts. It was calling to these machines, waiting for a bonded pair to activate them. Zura turned toward him, her expression no longer confused but sharp and clear. This was never about retrieving a lost signal. The mission was fake. Someone knew this relic was here, and used us to unlock it. Eric clenched his jaw, scanning the room, piecing together the bigger picture. The enemy attack, the strange orders, the lack of backup, it was all part of a trap to force a Rayari bond and unlock this ancient power. He looked at Zura, now standing in front of one of the towering mechs, her body glowing softly as the machine responded to her presence. "They tried to use us," Eric said darkly. "But they forgot something important. We're not just pawns anymore." Zura placed her palm on the mech's surface, and the giant eyes of the machine blinked open. A deep rumble filled the dome as the construct came to life, recognizing her as its pilot and sensing Eric as her bonded counterpart. Power surged through the ground, and the walls vibrated with ancient energy tied to Rayari warriors long dead. Zura turned to him, her expression calm but fierce, and said, "This is no longer just survival. This is revenge. And they won't see it coming." Above them, the Karnak warship descended from orbit, scanning the ruins with heavy weapons prepared to wipe out whatever lay below. Eric stepped beside her, no longer afraid of what she had become, because now she was something more. She was still Zura, still his partner. But now she was bonded to him in mind and soul, and together they were about to bring war to those who had tried to control them. The ancient weapon was awake, and it had chosen them. Asterisk. The ancient battle mech stood fully awake now, towering over the glowing chamber with eyes like suns. Zura and Eric stood before it, no longer confused or afraid, only focused, connected, and ready. She looked stronger than ever, the wild energy inside her now controlled and calm. Eric felt it too, his thoughts sharper, his instincts clearer. His heartbeat steady, like he was part of something greater than himself. The control interface opened, and without speaking, they moved forward together. Zura placed her hand on the central crystal, and Eric mirrored her on the opposite side. The machine responded instantly, scanning their linked energy and locking into sync with their shared rhythm. Suddenly, the walls around them split apart, and the mech rose upward on a hidden platform toward the surface. Above them, the Karnak warship hovered in the sky, its weapons glowing as it prepared to fire. Soldiers spread across the ruins like insects, unaware that something beneath the ground had awakened with purpose. Zura's voice echoed through the cockpit, steady and strong. They used our instincts to unlock this. Now we use it to finish them. Eric sat beside her as the mech reached the surface. Dust and rubble swirling in every direction. Alarms from the Karnak ship rang out, confused and frantic as their scanners picked up the rising giant. Zura's hands moved quickly, activating ancient weapons systems that responded to her thoughts like muscle memory. Eric took control of the tactical board, guiding their targeting systems with calm precision and focus. The Karnak opened fire first, plasma bolts raining down, lighting up the ruins like a second sunrise. But the mech shields absorbed the hits with ease, and when Zura returned fire, the earth itself seemed to roar. Beams of energy tore through enemy lines, vaporizing soldiers and cutting through metal like it was cloth. The warship tried to retreat, but it was too late. Eric launched the final strike, a focused energy lance that shot straight through the ship's engines. The explosion lit the sky, fire and smoke rolling like a storm cloud, while pieces of burning wreckage fell across the battlefield. Zura watched it all in silence, her expression unreadable, but her hand gently rested on Eric's shoulder, steady and warm. The bond inside them pulsed once more, but this time it wasn't burning. It was steady, complete and strong. When the battle ended, silence returned. To the planet, the beacon that had triggered all of this was now dark. Its job finished, its purpose fulfilled. Zura and Eric stepped out of the mech, standing among the ruins not as soldiers, but as something new. They weren't just partners, and they weren't just survivors. They were bonded in a way no one had seen in centuries. A transmission finally reached them from orbit, Human Command, asking if they had completed the objective. Eric looked at Zura, then replied calmly, "Objective completed." And rewritten. Command didn't understand what that meant, but it didn't matter anymore. This mission had changed everything. Zura touched her chest, where the bond mark now glowed softly under her skin. "I thought this bond would destroy me," she said quietly, "but it gave me more than I ever imagined." Eric looked at her, his voice gentle. "You're not alone anymore. And neither am I." They had started as strangers, two warriors forced to fight side by side by politics and war. But through fire, blood, instinct, and choice, they had become more. Something ancient had awakened in Zura, but something human had awakened in Eric too. Not just a bond of biology, but of respect, trust, and a fierce connection built in the heart of battle. They left the ruins together, hand in hand, knowing the war was far from over, but they would face it side by side. And if the galaxy ever came for them again, it would learn the hard way. No force was stronger than a Rayari warrior bound by instinct, except a Rayari warrior who had chosen her bond freely, and had a human who chose her back.